For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Leandi Korfer. Writer, editor and broadcaster Janice Warman joins me in studio to discuss her book, The Class of 79, telling the story of 3 students who risked their lives to destroy apartheid. Welcome, Janice.
Thanks for having me in.
Firstly, Janice, in the book you tell the stories of 3 individuals. Can you tell us a bit more about Marion Sparg, who was jailed for bombing a government building, Guy Berger, who was detained for having banned literature in his possession, and Zubaydah Jaffer, who was tortured for her role in the struggle?
Well, yes, all 3 of them were at Rhodes University when I arrived there in 1977. And of course it was a time of high tension in the country. The year before had been the Soweto riots of 1976, and then I arrived, and so did everyone else, at Rhodes University, which was known for its politics. And it was very exciting to arrive there and find that it had a much more liberal atmosphere than was the case where we were all from. In fact, my father saw me off at the airport and said, because it was known not only for politics but also for its drinking clubs, it was always in the Sunday papers with various scandals. He said, for heaven's sake, don't get drunk, don't get pregnant, and don't get involved in politics. So I can safely say that I didn't get pregnant when I was there. But I can't really answer for the other 2. Now, Guy Berger, who ended up as the head of journalism at Rhodes University many years later, was already a very charismatic figure, already involved in politics, and a little older than us. He was 1 year ahead of us. Marion Sparg was actually a very quiet, very intense, highly intelligent, studious girl at the back of the class. So nobody suspected how she really felt. She didn't get involved at university, but it only came out afterwards. Zubaydah Jaffer was political from the off. She got involved, and when she got there, in a dispute over the having black residences for the black students, and she was asked to lead one of those, and she said that was insulting, and she went off and found her own place. So she found, her political role when she arrived there. I think that helped her to kick off. So those are the 3, and then of course they each went on in their own way to fight the system, and as you say, to risk their lives to destroy apartheid.
And then when did you decide to write this book, and what was it about these 3 stories specifically that grabbed you?
Well, it was because over the years I'd heard of the horrific things that had happened to all of them. And then as the years went by, I began to think it would be wonderful to write a book and pull their stories together. And eventually in 2009, I was out here to write articles for The Observer and The Spectator in that election. And I thought, it's exactly 30 years on, now is the time to do it. So I looked them all up. I spent election night with Zubaydah Jaffer, which is a little bit like going around with royalty because everybody knows her. And I interviewed them all at that point for an article in the Observer magazine, and then from then turned it into a book.
So what do you believe each of these 3 people's most valuable contribution to the struggle was?
Well, in a way it was the same thing, because they all were aiming for the same purpose, which was to bring down apartheid, and they all risked their lives in doing so. However, it's not just their stories that I was interested in, because I feel that by bringing out the 3 stories who happened to be in the same class at university at the same time, I could emphasise the fact that there are so many others who we don't know about. We don't know their stories, we don't know their names even, who struggled, been tortured, died, or buried in places that we don't know. And in a way, I feel that this story will honour them too.
And then in doing the interviews for this book, did you get the sense that Marion, Guy and Zubaydah were satisfied with the country that emerged from apartheid and the state of affairs today?
Well, this was a question that I came back to each of them and asked them, and it varies. Marion was with me last night at a book launch in Johannesburg, and she has said that she feels hopeful still, despite the difficulties there have been this year, and the continuing poverty. Guy feels that there is still it's a very vibrant democracy. He said no one set of people will have control over others. People are free to protest and they feel free to change things, which they weren't under apartheid. And Zubaydah, of course, has a continuing role as a very active journalist, and she has this very important website, thejournalist.org.za, and she is the writer in residence at Orange Free State University. And she actually, again, I think feels more hopeful. I'll know more when I see her tomorrow night at the book launch in Cape Town, because she's joining me there.
And then in writing the story, you included some of your personal experiences of conducting the interviews and the journey you undertook. What was the reason for that, as opposed to only focusing on the events that took place 25 to 30 years ago?
In writing the book, I did use myself as a link between the stories because I thought that could be helpful, but I didn't want to put too much in about myself. And in fact, it was Guy Berger, who read the finished book, who said to me, you need to put more in at the end about how you feel. And make it a bit more personal, because it will make it more powerful. So in fact, I changed the ending, and that's thanks to Guy.
So how do you feel about South Africa today, and taking into account everything that's happened over the past 30 years? What are the country's opportunities or potential pitfalls that it has to avoid?
In 2009, the country was a much more hopeful place. That election was a happy one, in the sense that people were optimistic. It was felt that South Africa's democracy was working. There was a new political party in Cope. I spent election day on the top of Helen Zille's campaign bus, whizzing around the Cape, talking to lots of people. The atmosphere was great. I spent election night at Zubaydah at the election centre, and the feedback I got then was really good. The ordinary people I spoke to were doing good things and felt happier. Now I've come back this time, and I find there's a mood of despondency and fear. This was emphasised for me by the fact that when I was in Grahamstown talking to the students, one of the lecturers said to me she could take me out to the township so that I could meet some people out there. And I was deeply shocked, because I went to the township on the edge of Finger Village, which had been built over an old cemetery. It's mostly leaky shacks. There are little skips at the corners. There's no rubbish collection. The people I spoke to are despairing. Many of them have had jobs. They would work if they could. They can't find work. Children. Some of the children look particularly malnourished. I talked to a woman whose daughter had been raped and murdered last month, and she is now looking after her two children, who are 1 and 3. The 3-year-old has epilepsy. The 1-year-old looks to me too small for his age. Where are the social services coming in and saying, now what do you need? How can we help you? Here are some benefits. She's without hope, rather like the name of the place apparently means place of no hope. So I do think that more can be done.
Okay, thank you so much. And then you also mentioned to me just now that you have a children's book out on a similar topic to that of the class of 79. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, that's right. It was inspired in some ways by the same events. And it's about a little boy growing up in the backyard of a white family house with his mother, who's the housekeeper. And he rescues a freedom fighter and eventually goes on the run. And this is all in the context of the Soweto riots of '76. I was inspired by Marion's tale of the camps in Angola, where she obviously went to train. And there is a character in there who's a little bit like Marion.
Thanks so much. That was Janice Warman speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about her book, The Class of 79.